Good morning, everybody. In today's class, we'd like to process the different kinds of applications that are available in the non-destructive evolution, and we'll be looking after one by one as per its specifications. So initially, as far as your syllabus point has been considered, we are having the sixth unit that is applications in various fields, as it clearly specifies this unit number 6. Industrial applications in NDE, the span of NDE activities in the railway sector, nuclear sector and non-nuclear, the chemical industries, aircraft and aerospace industries, offshore gas and petroleum projects, coal mining, NDE in pressure vessels, castings and welding constructions. So this is your sixth unit related to non-destructive evolution subject, and with this in 2 or 3 classes we'll be concluding this unit, and later on we'll be progressing with respect to the revision classes. Initially, in the today's class, we would like to process the NDT application in the case of this railway systems and railway sector, and the non-destructive testing methodologies. What are the testing methodologies we'll be utilizing, and what's the main purpose in the case of this railway sector? We'll be looking in detail. So initially, we'll be looking after what is the NDT. It's a non-destructive testing process which doesn't have direct contact with respect to the objects. Upon identifying or inspecting the objects, defects within the objects, we come to know there will not be any destruction with respect to the working process or work specimen. That's a NDT test, and similar workpiece can be examined in various NDT processes such as magnetic testing process, decurrent testing process, infrared testing process, ultrasonic testing process, as we have been discussed in the entire this syllabus, rest of the 5 units. What's the main purpose of it? We'll be discussing. There's the main purpose. Indeed, to examine the object's specifications related to its dimensional accuracies, internal structures, atomic nature, thermal analysis, etc. can be very wide based upon the utilization in the practical world. So how many types of non-destructive tests are existing? So we're having different types of non-destructive testing based upon its classifications. We'll be looking one by one. For strength assessment of the concrete. So moreover, in the railway sector, this concrete beds of the unit dimensions will be utilized for holding the railway track. So in the analysis of this strength or that concrete be considered, can be examined by this NDT techniques. And for corrosion assessment, so this railway tracks, almost all it will be in the static position throughout the year, even in different seasonal variations. So it will be coming in contact with respect to the winter season, summer season, and rainy season. So most probably in the winter season and rainy season, due to the coldness in the winter season, it leads to corrosion, and maximum in the case of the rainy season, we use it to observe that water content direct H2O will be in contact with respect to the materials which are in static position exposed to the atmospheric conditions. Mainly, there's a greater drawback is to observe in the case of this railway tracks. So it leads to form corrosion because it will be directly in contact with respect to the oxidation process and leads to the status of corrosion. So at what percentage it is being acetating and having decreasing in its confinement will be having a detail. That is one of the technique progress in the case of this NDT. For the details of reinforcement steel, so if at all the strength of the objects due to the corrosion, the material will be getting deposited as a layer, and upon the movement of these trains over the track, the loss of the strength will be getting taking place mainly at the affected zones. So that will be getting done by replaced by the analysis persons. Those will be the having from the track experts. And next one for locating the crack and its growth. So whether the crack is identified or not, and that is being existing within the object or not, and if at all it is being existing, at what growth it is being existing. Mainly, we'll be discussing one by one topic. What is meant by NDT test? Normally, it's some technique used to identify the properties of the materials, components, shapes, different dimensional accuracies, without causing any deformations within the object. So there will not be any direct contact with respect to the specimen. Furthermore, it will be used for performing the operation in different processes of NDT also. Mainly, these NDT methods are done for strengthening the materials by imparting the properties such as strength, stiffness, ductility, malleability, so on. So wherever it is necessary, certain property is necessary for the material for a particular process that used to confine, and accessing the corrosion, even measuring of the crack and its covering and its quality, identification of the internal defects with respect to different work areas in the concrete structures, oil and gas industries, chemical industries, and different blending operations, etc. Coming to the economical status, cost effectiveness. Nominally, the equipment leads to an high economical factor, and its initial cost is very much huge. Even for the simulation process also. So before moving on to the reality basis, we'd like to process towards the simulation activity. That's not about the experimentational process we will be saying in the laboratory, or else the laboratory process, normally we can say. So even that simulation process also lead to an very much high in economical factor. But when compared to the conventional mode of operating, there is nothing but the object will be directly contact with respect to the material as we are being processing the identification or identifying of the mechanical properties by Brinell's hardness test, Rockwell hardness test, or else the impact testing process such as ISOD test or Charpy test that we'll be utilizing in our MOS laboratory, as you people have performed the operations in our second year. The work part will be getting destructed, that too in an plasticity of an inch. So permanently it will be getting affected. But in the case of this non-destructive evolution, it is very much simple when need to process the testing methodology, and even the entire testing process can be performed within a short time period. Within the short time period. Coming to the major purpose, indeed to estimate the in situ compressive strength, for estimating the uniformity and homogeneity, for estimating the quality and relation to standard requirement, identifying the areas of lower integrity in comparison to the other parts. So nominally we will be realizing the dual combined objects in the case of this manufacturing. Nominally we will be calling as in composite materials in our mechanical language. So particularly identifying the areas of lower integrity, and it has been compared with respect to and confiding parts from one part to the other part. What are the properties that are being deviating? We can clearly examine over it. Identification of the cracks or internal voids in the process of casting and other imperfections. So casting is the common technology that is being processed for the heaviest objects, those which are having processed at a range of more than 650 degrees centigrade of temperature. So nominally, almost all the parts that we are being utilizing should be casted. In the case of this railway sector, which are heaviest strength objects mixed with an only the ferrous content of materials, mainly, majorly, with respect to high carbon content in its composition. Even the main purpose of this NDT test commencement is to monitor the changes within the structure of the concrete, identification of reinforcement profile, and measuring the cover diameter and its dimensions for size, shape, internal structure, molecular deviations, etc. can be identified. So how many types of non-destructive tests we are having, particularly for strength assessment in the case of this concrete? These are some of the techniques, the types of NDT tests for the assessment of this concrete. First one is the rebound hammer. Second, Windsor probe technique. Third one is core cutter, ultrasonic pulse velocity test, permeability testing, video borescope. For getting the corrosion assessment, in the case of this NDT, resistivity meter and corrosion analyzer plays a major role for identifying the corrosion levels within the ferrous content of objects. that we are utilizing in the manufacturing. Then for details of this reinforcement steel, we'll be preferring this profometer for identifying the strength of the object. There is a steel, strength of the steel that we will be utilizing in the manufacturing. For identification of the cracks and the grain growth, so whether it is being increasing so farly or else decreasing upon the eradication process that is being performed externally, such as the annealing heat treatment processes, annealing, nitriding, and carburizing processes. The levels also will be examining very much clearly, or identifying the rectification processes also very much clearly in such cases. So for that, the crack detection microscope, eddy current meter, and infrared thermal imager will give the clear-cut results regarding the crack and its growths. We'll be looking in detail with respect to the strength assessment of concrete. So first one, we have said that rebound hammer. Moreover, it's used to access the compressive strength of the concrete already in the existing structures. See here, when a plunger of a rebound hammer is pressed against the surface of the concrete, as displaying in the diagram, the spring controlled mass will be getting rebounds, and the extent of such rebound depends on the surface hardness. See here, rebounds. Rebounds is the concept that will be directly relating to our Newton's third law. So the strength that is we are being applying in the form of a work in one unit direction is getting rebounds, that is regaining back with the equal and opposite forces. In such a way, the similar strength, compressive strength, will be getting as a reading directly that provides back to the hammer. Considering one of the major principle of this rebound, nominally it's an elastic mass depends particularly on the hardness of the concrete surface against which the mass will get strikes on it. See, corresponding notations of whatever the pressure that you people are applying on the surface of the wall will be getting reflected and analyzed to which level it is being acetated or withstand it, particularly towards its hardness. And if at all, in order to increase the hardness, the binders will be getting changed in the form of materials in the composition of the manufacturing materials. Next thing is an Windsor probe. Windsor probe. See, this is the equipment that is Windsor probe. It's used to find the compressive strength of the existing concrete structure, already constructed wall, concrete structures such as pillars, etc. You need to examine it. Nominally, it's the equipment utilized, which is having a high compressive strength of concrete. Nominally, driving a steel probe into the surface of the concrete. That the depth of the probe penetrates into the concrete bed, which is having the highest compressive strength towards it, and analyzing entirely parameters nominally related to its strength. Third one is the core cutter machine. It is used for estimation of the physical characteristics or concrete. Nominally, as we'll be taking the samples initially in the experimentational levels. As the maximum depth of the core, which can be cut about 430 mm, and particularly the diameters of 52 to 78 mm. Coming to its major principle, only the core is otherwise usually cut by means of a rotating cutting tool. And nominally the material utilized for the cutting tool, it's a diamond bit. For this diamond, which is the highest or topmost strengthened material having its bonding with respect to ionic range. Continuously, the lubrication is necessary to supply for the cutter because due to its frictional forces, high amount of temperatures will be getting elevated and maybe leads towards the hazardous situations. And the core, which is attracted from the existing structure, normally used for different testing process, indeed to find the compressive strength or the cracks which are being existed at the internal walls or to a particular depth considerations of the objects and water absorptions towards different binders, etc., can be examined very much clearly by this core cutter process. Coming to the permeability tester. Normally, it's one of the instrument used for particularly determining the air permissibility of the utmost layer of the concrete. Normally, we'll be saying that covering of the concrete, nothing but plastic, plastic. Sorry, not the material, the plastic that will be getting done over the concrete bed already had constructed towards it. Basically, it will be operating under the vacuum, which is used on the concrete structure and used for the analysis of the quality of cover concrete with respect to its durability. Coming to the major principle and the utilities, permissibility test measure the ease with which the liquids or ions and gases can penetrate into the concrete. So nominally, the concrete, it's a mixture of pillars in the construction field will be having the composition of this rock, cement, silicon, sand, and some of the binders will be utilizing H2, etc. And even presently, after getting the plastic, that's application of some binders such as cement, maximum in constraint, and silica mixture, there will be turning a plastic, as we will be seeing in a nominal construction fields. And the ceilings, such as calcium, plays a major role for having the finishingness towards it. And some of the polymers will be utilizing for a fragrance range and appearance. Normally, in the case of this appearance, different colors. So pigments leads to different colors. And this all, even though at different levels of these binders are protecting the entire construction of this concrete by this concrete bed, even it exposes or grasps the all considerations such as liquids or gases which will be having a capability of penetrating towards it. So for the better is with respect to the water and gas, and even the deleterious matters such as the chloride ions that will be getting penetrated into the concrete. So at what level it is getting penetrated? So how far the different layers which are protecting that particular concrete bed that is being penetrating can be clearly identified in the case of this testing process. The main utilizations or uses it is to locate the cracks, identification of the porosity, because the bond, if at all the bonding has not at all confined to a maximum range of its specifications, automatically it leads towards the porosity, and even some of the other defects which breaks the surface of the materials. And normally a better to indeed to identify the surface level of the defects, our liquid penetrant test plays a major role indeed to identify even the finishing levels or rough surface areas, and to maximum acquisite basis of areas at the finishing ranges, and to a minimal depth considerations clearly can be examined in the case of this testing process. So nominally it's the permissibility tester. Next, the ultrasonic pulse velocity meter is utilized in the case of railway stations for assessment of the quality of concrete in already existing structures, and even it is utilized for finding the entire internal structure, that too based on its density factor. So density, that is reluctance with respect to its weight based on the pressurized conditions, and even can be monitored with respect to the quality of concrete, and can be examined its homogeneity and uniformity upon its manufacturing. Coming to the video boroscope, is the equipment instrument utilized to monitor the internal condition of the concrete structure, nominally the bonding natures, and how the binders has been holding with respect to the existing material in its composition will be clearly ascertaining towards this video boroscope to which level the bonding has been commenced, and can analyze its internal strength aspects also. And nominally these are progressed with respect to identify the subsurface levels itself, because the specimen with respect to the eye and magnifying defects that will not allow the detector by an unaided eyes. Particularly identification of this corrosion assessments by NDT. There is a corrosion analyzer equipment used for the identification of the strength of the objects in the concrete structures which will be utilized in the railway sector, particularly the building structures of the railway tracks, which holds the tracks very much confinedly, tightly, without any deviations, particularly with the same deviations between the rail through tracks that leads parallel in to a particular length that varies with respect to the kilometers, some x and kilometers. Basically, it's an electrochemical process of detection and need to identify its internal structures in the bars. It clearly measures the electrical resistance between the reinforcement and the surface to the evaluate the corrosion activity. So internally, there is nothing but internally the deviations are being taken place. So as we have been already pointed out before, the railway track which is made up of with high ferrous content of material, always it will be in environmental strategy only. So throughout the seasonal variations such as summer season or else the winter season or else the rainy season, it will be keeping on in its ideal position. So as per our mechanical knowledge is confided, in the range of summer season, due to the high temperature factor, it tends to expand. So further, the connections has been given at an hole joints, hook joints or coupling joints, which tends to extend the track or a rail, nominally we can say. And after decreasing towards to until to the recrystallization range of temperature, it will compress, contracting back as per the Hooke's law concept. So the variations in the strain levels can be examined clearly with respect to the resistance variations. And nominally, second thing it is in the rainy seasons, it leads to a direct contact with respect to the water. So ferrous when compared and reacted with respect to the H2O, directly it leads to the formation of the rusting. Rusting is nothing but the internal properties are getting elevated in the form of some minimal powder which is deposited at the upper layer. So by that we can conclude that some of the strength is getting lost in a micro range, that too in a micro range. So at what range the strength has been decreased can be analyzed clearly by tracing this corrosion analyzer. At what thickness, by the measuring of this thickness in an micrometers, which is deposited at the surfaces of the material, by that we can calculate the decrementing of the strength or mechanical properties from the material. As a statistical range, coming to analyze with respect to this copper sulfate electrode as an measuring element, in that the levels of the readings will be getting varied, and based upon that the critical position or medium range of position or low range of E affecting zones can be identified very much clearly. So if at all it has been clearly specifying in the channel less than minus 200 microvolts, if it has been generated upon the examining process, it's having 90% and even greater than the probability that the corrosion activities is not at all taking place. So particularly it's normally we can say that it's an stainless steel material which doesn't have the effect of this ferrous reaction with respect to the oxidation process, and hence normally we can use to refer in our laboratories also. Stainless steel is the material that we'll be utilizing as a tool for processing over the mild steel and cast iron materials. So now mild steel and cast iron materials will be forming a rusting within a hours of times also. But stainless steel will be in complete silver color itself. It will not be having any of the corrosion activity over it. So hence, I can conclude that 90% is this possibility of not happening the corrosion towards it. So if the A range in the sulfate electrode, that is 200 microvolts to minus 350 microvolts, has been initiating. That corrosion will be getting formed, but it is uncertain. There's a various low in phase. So if at all greater than minus 350 microvolts has been initiated in the display, it's having greater than 90% of the probability of corrosion. So hence 90% is above, in the sense in the composition, ferrous will be definitely adding in its composition. Second thing is an resistivity meter. It's an instrument utilized to measure the electrical resistance of the concrete cover. So concrete cover. So what is meant by concrete cover? Almost the pillars has been placed over, and next thing is in plasting and the plasting is called the concrete cover. So whether it has been binded correctly or not, and what is the strength? So reinforcement, nothing but addition of the strength to the particular internal structures or internal binders of the materials also. So whether it is being executed or not, will be having a clear cut resistivity over here that can be examined clearly. Major principle is that the corrosion of steel in the concrete is an electrochemical process that is generating flow of current and dissolving the metals. Particularly, this is a technique which will be utilizing in high confined industries. It initiates with respect to the resistivity and the limitations towards it. When the permissibility is greater than 12 kilo ohms per centimeter, corrosion is impossible. When possibilities or porosities generations is equal to 8 in range, possibilities is equal to 8 range, kilo ohms per centimeter, kilo ohms centimeters, corrosion is definitely possible. And phase less than 8, it is certainly fairly possible. Right? There's the resistivity comparisons between the different acetations, so confiding ranges. And NDT for details of reinforced steel or the reinforcement of steels, we'll be having the discussion towards it in the next class. Thank you.